Right, so it's just gone 9 minutes past 7. Welcome back to Sabahul Muslim on Radio Islam International. Stage 6 load shedding. It hit us on a Sunday. Like I was saying in the last hour when we just started the program, on Friday we thought that by Sunday it was going to ease up. That's what ESCOM actually had said in a notice that they sent out, that from 5 in the morning on Sunday it would drop to a lower stage. So we were in stage 4. I think it was going to go to stage 3 or something like that. But then what happened was that Saturday night it just went to stage 6. And here you heard on the news, and we've been hearing for the last 24 hours, that there could be a further escalation. Further escalation means stage 7, stage 8. I don't think we've gone beyond stage 6 thus far, have we? I think it was in June, July that here in Gauteng we were struggling with stage 6. KZN at the time had a bit of a reprieve because after the floods, they were not being hit with too much of load shedding. The big concern was that stage 6 on a Sunday, when demand is not as much as during the weekdays. That tells you about the extent of the problem. You can't panic, sure. Hopefully they'll be able to get to grips with it. They want to purchase from private providers now as an emergency measure. Ramaphosa was in the US, then he flew to the UK for the Queen's funeral. He held an online meeting, and we understand he's not going back to the US. He's coming back now. He's sending his ministers back to the US. But he's done this before, where he has to come back early from trips. People have been very critical of him, saying that he's been responsible for ESCOM from the time he was deputy president. He was given that responsibility by the Zuma administration. What has he done? Many are saying if De Ruyter was a black CEO in over 2 years, if this is his performance, then he would have been long gone. Others are saying, well, you see, we now seeing the consequences of what happened during the state capture era. You can't blame it all on Ramaphosa. You can perhaps blame him for not doing enough in recent years, but it was a colossal problem to start with, and the same would apply to De Ruyter. De Ruyter is not a politician, right? It's a slight difference there. Ramaphosa is, and yeah, personally, I think we've got to cut De Ruyter a little bit more slack. Ramaphosa, I don't know, because he still represents the party that got us into this mess in the first place, and that's the ANC. How much do you blame the Zuma years, or the wasted years that some would call it, the state capture years? Because there are many reports that there's still a lot of wrongdoing ongoing currently with the diesel, with the coal, with sabotage, with corruption and the factional issues. And that's why we're having this extent of load shedding. I don't think anyone expected ESCOM's problems to be solved overnight. But this extent of load shedding is a different matter altogether. Now, it strengthens the case to go solar, as far as possible. If you can get totally off the grid and you can afford that, that's the best option currently. I think there isn't too much of debate around that. If not, get partially off the grid. Because look, I mean, even with a generator now, 6 hours a day with the high fuel price to run a generator is expensive. And the thing is that the electricity bill doesn't come down. So if you've had a whole lot of load shedding in September, when your bill comes at the end of September, you don't see much of a difference. For 6 hours a day, I wasn't using power from the grid. So I've got to see, a reduction in my bill. It doesn't. You end up spending more because you're running a generator. Inverters, perhaps, in such a situation are a little bit more practical than a generator. Both have their pros and cons. When you have no electricity, like we've had on occasion in Lens, for a day, 2 days straight, then the generator is more useful because you can top up the fuel. And once the inverter runs flat and you've got a continuous blackout, you can't have it recharged. With this 2 hours at a time or 4 hours at a time, I suppose you can have it recharged, and it helps. It's a bit more cost effective as compared to a generator under these kinds of circumstances, say stage 6. But not everybody can afford inverter, even generator, let alone a solar system that will take you totally off the grid. And it results in a lot of frustration. Those people who are totally off the grid, I suppose the frustration is minimal, right? Because you're off the grid anyway, load shedding or not. Those who are running generators or inverters, there is a degree of frustration still because you can't run everything. And like I said, with the generator, there's the cost. And those who can't afford that as well, the frustration is at its peak. How do you actually get work done when you can't get these things going? So the question is, how do you manage the stress and inconvenience of load shedding? How do you prevent yourself from becoming totally despondent about the future of South Africa? It's at moments like this. I mean, when we go through it, then everyone is very angry, very frustrated. As soon as it's alleviated, even if it's for a while, for a couple of weeks, then things go back to normal. But people then talk, and the discourse, the narrative is very negative about the country, not only the government. So how do you manage the stress and the inconvenience of load shedding? There's a lot of stress. The ironing doesn't get done timeously. The washing doesn't get done timeously. The cooking doesn't get done timeously. The opening and closing of garage doors becomes an issue. Office work stops because you can't access your electronics. The Wi-Fi networks trouble, even if it's backed up. The cell phone towers, after a prolonged period, even if you've got electricity, but if the towers are running on backup, then cell phone connectivity becomes an issue. So the frustration and the inconvenience is there. How do you manage it? How do you deal with it? How do you prevent yourself from becoming totally despondent about the future of South Africa? It's a two-part question. You can WhatsApp us on 072 786 1548, or you can email smr@radioislam.co.za. Tell us about how you manage the stress and inconvenience of load shedding, and how do you prevent yourself from becoming totally despondent about the future of the country. 7:15 in a bit, we have our hadith for the morning from Riyadus Salihin, the chapter on the virtue of the weak and the poor and the marginalized in society. The Palestine report with Malana Ibrahim Musa at about 7:20-ish. After 7:30, words with Malana Wajah, tafsir of Surah Banu Israel. Today we'll be wrapping up the discussion on the rights and virtues of parents with two important points. At 7:45, we talk about investigation into classified documents that was seized at Trump's Mar-a-Lago estate, the tussle between him and the FBI. After 8, it's Heritage Day this Saturday. It's Heritage Month, September. But what does it mean when you have load shedding and you've got corruption and crime and collapsing infrastructure? Do people even care about heritage? And we're going to have a two-way discussion at about 8:15. Our theme discussion for this week is on inner peace and self-actualization. And then we talk towards the end of the program about the Shanghai Cooperation Organization Summit in Uzbekistan, the SCO. So that's what you can look forward to between now and 9 o'clock, inshallah.
Hadith discussions on Sabahul Muslim with Maulana Sulaimaan Ravat.
عن ابي سعيد الخدري رضي الله عنه عن النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم قال: احتجت الجنة والنار، فقالت النار: في الجبارون والمتكبرون، وقالت الجنة: في ضعفاء الناس ومساكنهم، فقضى الله بينهما: إنك الجنة رحمتي أرحم بك من أشاء، وإنك النار عذابي أعذب بك من أشاء، ولكليكما علي ملؤها. رواه Muslim. Abu Sa'id Khudri radiallahu anhu narrates that the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alayhi wasallam said, Paradise and the hellfire had a debate. Hellfire said, within me are the tyrants and the arrogant. Paradise said, within me are the poor and weak. Allah then resolved the dispute by saying, you, Paradise, are my mercy. I show mercy to whosoever I wish through you. And you, hellfire, are my punishment. I punish whosoever I wish through you. And I will fill both of you. So this debate either took place literally, according to Imam Nawawi, where there was a dispute between paradise and hell. How did they talk to each other? Allah alone knows, but Allah can give them the ability to do so. They both had a perception, and they both felt that, they both argued their points. Others say it's by means of an example. But the lesson here, and this is what ties up with our theme, is that the majority of the people of Jannah will be the poor and humble. It doesn't mean that poor and humble people cannot end up in hellfire if their belief is incorrect. Sometimes a poor person can still be arrogant. On the other hand, it doesn't mean every wealthy person will be in Jahannam. Many wealthy people whose intentions are right and whose attitude is right, they will earn a very high level in Jannah because they use their wealth in the pleasure of Allah Ta'ala. But in the end, as Umar radiallahu anhu had said, عِزُّ الدُّنْيَا بِالْمَالِ, the honor of the world is through wealth. وَعِزُّ الْآخِرَةِ بِالْأَعْمَالِ, while the honor of the year after is through deeds. So if Allah has granted us wealth, we should make extra effort to remain humble and sincere. And if Allah hasn't granted us wealth, we should see it as a lesser of a test and still work on our humility and our faith, so that we end up in Jannah. But the lesson here that ties up with the theme is that if people don't have wealth and status and material things, don't look down upon them, because the majority of the inhabitants of Jannah are those people, those very people. May Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala make us from amongst those who will be granted Jannatul Firdaus without reckoning. Ameen. Ya Rabbal Alameen.
This